From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast. This is episode 500. Yes, 500. I am Andrew Now Forum, Andrew NLSC on X. Joining me for our 200th episode together, my co-host Derek, DP3 Now Forum, and DP3G and DP384 on X. Derek, glad to be on the mics with you as always. It's here. This is the big one.
Unbelievable. 500 episodes of a podcast. What a milestone. Also, it is our 200th episode together as a team, so we'll be celebrating that as well. But this edition of the NLSC Podcast is dedicated to celebrating those two milestones. And Andrew, it's been a lot of fun recording with you for 200 weeks. And I think that my favorite part about it is, the fact that I made a friend. Like, you and I are really close now, and we connect basketball, video games all the time, and we have a blast, and we share stories, and we talk about life and whatnot. But another favorite aspect of it is just the consistency. We've been releasing week in, week out. In fact, our first episode together was on November 3rd of 2019. So that was right around the release of NBA 2K20. And we've just discussed everything under the sun, and it's been a blast. And I also want to thank the community for supporting us for, those 200 episodes. And we have a good audience every week on various platforms. And, thank you to the community for also supporting the NLSC Podcast since the start. And like you stated, 500 episodes. So that is just some wild stuff.
Absolutely, and that's one of my favorite parts as well, being able to make a new friend, somebody who has very similar experiences with basketball gaming, and we are pretty much the same age, actually, and have some very familiar experiences with basketball and basketball gaming, a lot of the same nostalgia, a lot of the same views on basketball gaming, which is, I like having that on the podcast. I don't like having the contrived false debate that is so popular these days on a lot of certainly talk shows and those talking heads on sports discussion programs and so forth. But it has been really great to make a new friend like that. That's how it's been with our community and a lot of the people that I've worked with here on the NLSC over the years, being able to make these friends through the through the bonds of the internet. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done as a team, what the show has accomplished. I mean, you look at a lot of podcasts, they last about 10 episodes or less. Everyone wants to start a podcast because it's very easy to start a podcast, but to maintain it and to maintain it for as long as we have, 11 years and counting, and going through a few different hosts over the years. And even I'm not the original host of the NLC Podcast. That is Jasmine and Leftos. So shout out to Jasmine and Leftos, to John and Leftos for starting things off. All the co-hosts that I've had over the years, Ben, Arcane, Kenny, Andrew the X, Eric, Pat, P-Dub, Leon, guest hosts like Izzy Snow, all of our other guests. Obviously, we've had some great guests on the show. We're going to get into that as we celebrate this milestone. But thanks to you, Derek, for continuing this journey with me, starting as a guest host and joining the team and show as a permanent host and creating all this content together. And again, thank you for your friendship.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And I also want to say that I think the primary reason why we made it past 10 episodes, right, as a team, you and I, and why the podcast has lasted so long in general is just a true passion for the topic.
Definitely.
Right? For basketball gaming, for, the content that's being created. And I think that most podcasts out there fail because of, possibly a lack of passion, a lack of knowledge, a lack of true love for the content that they're trying to produce, with the podcast. Or, maybe they even don't have the time. But we've always made time for this show, and we love, taking in listener feedback. We love putting out the mailbags every week and getting that interaction with the community and hearing their thoughts on basketball, video games, past and present. We enjoy, people sharing their clips with the top 10 plays of the week. And just in general, we're always retweeting and quote tweeting or reposting as it is now, Andrew.
Yeah.
Because it's longer Twitter. Still can't. Terrible rebrand. I'll just keep saying it. Terrible rebrand. But, we love hearing your thoughts. We love talking about them on the show. etc. And I think one thing that's really shined over the last 4 years is the NLSC YouTube. I think that we were able to get that back up off the ground. Parsec was definitely helpful in that regard because you and I were able to start connecting online and playing these games together and either playing co-op or head-to-head and sharing those experiences. I mean, we got the podcasts on the YouTube. We got gameplay videos from, past and present 2Ks, lives, the past NBA, 989 series, Konami, et cetera. We go all the way back to Double Dribble, et cetera. And I think that, it should be very apparent how much we love basketball video games and how much the community that follows the NLSC loves them as well.
Indeed. And before we go on, need to circle back, and because I forgot to mention it, but also my thanks to our listeners, all of our fantastic listeners throughout the years, sticking with us and enjoying our content, interacting with us, and responding to your mailbag prompts each and every week. It's been really cool to have that interaction. But yeah, it's been great to do more YouTube content. In fact, we go all the way back to NBA basketball for Intellivision now. We go right back to almost the start of basketball gaming. But that is something that I really enjoy about what we're doing with the show these past few years, especially revisiting these games. We've always got something to talk about. We have huge collections, as we've said before, and we love to revisit the classics. We love to revisit the obscure, play them together, share that footage on YouTube, but also talk about it on the podcast. And even when news is slow, because the previous season is not what it used to be, we've always got something to talk about, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think it's just because not only do we have big collections, like basketball video game collections, but we just always have a game we want to throw on, right? There's a thing about collecting and then not using your collection. There's actually a lot of people out there that do that. But as you and I have stated on so many episodes before, we don't collect just to collect. We're looking to play these games. And that's why, like you said, we'll go back and we'll play a game like Intellivision, and then we'll also be playing the newest titles and whatnot. And I think the community likes to see that. I think that's what's made the top 10 so special.
It has.
We're year 3, week 23, and stay tuned, folks, because next week we have the Halloween special that we do every year. So we're going to have some fun Halloween music, some Halloween themed highlights and whatnot. That's going to be a lot of fun. But the top 10 isn't just the newest game. It's not just NBA 2K24. It's, 2K23, 2K24, past live games, NBA 2K10, Live 06. We've had, at B-Ball Video Games breaking the backboard on College Slam in there. We've had a double dribble, half court 3 in there. So I think it makes the top 10 special. I think it makes it unique, and the community gets really into that. And I also love the fact that the community, as a result, has started recording more of their footage. I think it's cool that they have a recorder up ready to, capture a great highlight, because that's something that I always dreamed of when I was younger, growing up playing basketball games, because we didn't have that ability back then. And I just think it's really cool that, the community is so into it.
I've actually shared some photos on Twitter, or X as it is now, as you say, a wonderful rebrand there, I said very sarcastically, of NBA Live 96 PC that I've taken off the screen, off the monitor, and that's pretty much what you had to do back in the day. Take a photo, hope that it turned out fine when the film got developed, or if you could hook it up to a VCR, you were able to do that, but it's not as easy as what we have now with Elgato, with Action, and Bandicam, and all of the software we have and the hardware we have to record, and I'm always doing it now. You've got me in the habit, and I love that as well, that I'm always looking to record gameplay. Unless I'm just throwing on a game quickly to get a screenshot, I'm usually not recording then. But even then, I've usually got Action open, so I've got the option to hit the time shift record. So I guess it is always there, actually. But no, I love that. I love that the community is doing it. I love that we do spotlight games, past and present, that we are trying to normalize retro gaming, retro basketball gaming, because for too long people were looking down on it. Why are you still playing this? Because it's still fun. And I think it would be boring if we just restricted the top 10 to 2K24. Obviously, people are enjoying that. Some people, others not so much. And we have mixed feelings as well, as we've said on previous shows. But you get that whole spectrum of basketball gaming. And all these old games can still produce highlights. So it's really cool to see that each and every week.
Yeah, I think that what I appreciate the most is the fact that not only, do we have new listeners and new submissions for the top 10 pretty consistently and whatnot, but the regulars, Andrew, that have been with us over the last few years, and some of them have been with the NLSC and supporting that content, supporting the site, etc. For well over a decade, but they're still around. They're still tuning into the podcast. They're still going on the NLSC and looking in at the forum topics. They're still entering the modding sections. Sometimes if they're not entering the modding sections, they're entering like the basketball discussion sections or even the off-topic sections. So I am blown away by the, consistent support by so many people from over the years. Now, this episode, we're going to be sharing a lot of sound bites from past episodes, some ones that you handpicked. And most of those are going to be from before you and I became a team, kind of just more of, what was happening when the, NLSC podcast was mostly new. And I think that our community is going to love to listen to those. But before we get to those, Andrew, I wanted to talk real quick about an NBA 2K10 session that we had using your final 2010 NBA 2K10 roster, which includes missing legends. And we used the 90s East versus the 90s West. And of course, on the 90s East, we now have Michael Jordan in 2K10. Now, remember, he was not in there by default, but he has a perfect cyber face. His animation package is excellent. They even have a Jordan dunk package in there, Andrew, even though he wasn't officially in the game.
Yeah, the Jumpman dunk, yeah.
How about that? And it adds a bunch of new legends that were not in the game. And what an absolute blast that game was. And we ended up, it was close. We ended up winning by 7, 84-77. That game is on the NLSC YouTube. But what amazing basketball action. How good is that atmosphere in NBA 2K10? The crowd, the arena music, the excited commentary, just the lighting. It's so vibrant. It's very welcoming and whatnot. And just getting out on the fast break is so fun and making moves to the hoop. The dunks are loud. The animations are smooth. People talk about NBA 2K11, rightfully so, as the greatest basketball video game of all time or one of the greatest. But NBA 2K10 can oftentimes be equal or even more fun. That game is just really good. And that roster mod that you put together, I'll be using it a lot.
I was very pleased with how that roster turned out. That is my first roster release for NBA 2K. So I have less experience modding that game than, or any 2K game, as opposed to NBA Live. I wanted to make sure that I studied the default ratings and how they all worked before I did that. It seems to be working out pretty well. So again, I'm pleased with that. Not to pat myself on the back too much. But going through all the other legends, that's the other thing I want to emphasize. Obviously, originally I was just going to add Michael Jordan and other missing legends to that roster, but then I went through the existing legends and saw, they've got some pretty copy and paste attributes. I think they all had 99 for close shot and 99 for close shot and 86 for layup or something. The first two ratings in there were all 99 and 86, copied and pasted throughout all the legends.
Reminder to our listeners that, yes, there was still a lot of copy and paste going on, not only in the 2K series, but in the NBA Live series as well for Legends.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. A lot of shortcuts taken. And look, it's nice that that content is in the game, but they definitely could have done a better job with it. So I went through and fixed up all of those attributes. A lot of the tendencies weren't assigned. They just had zeros for everything or just invalid values there. So fixed those all up. But they seem to be working out pretty well. When we tested out a beta version of that roster, I had set Clyde Drexler's three-point tendency too high, or maybe it was too high by default, and he was taking a few too many threes readily when he should have been driving, so I adjusted that. That seems to have worked. And how nice is it when you actually change the ratings, Derek, and change the tendencies, and the game actually responds to it. It actually uses the ratings that are on hand effectively. They're not just meaningless. They do have an effect on the engine. And 2K10's engine is pretty good. As you say, the animations, some great animations in there. And the authenticity, and again, not just patting myself on the back here, but the authenticity of that game in general. You can tell that they were just going for authentic NBA action, and it works. Even with the Legends, got to fix some attributes, obviously, but when you do, that was some great 90s action. The physicality in the paint, the big dunks. I just love that game. We have to play with that more.
There was a play where I had Grant Hill in the same spot where in real life he crossed over Pippen and went in for a dunk. And I did a crossover in NBA 2K10 during that game. It was very similar. And I got to the hoop and I did a switch hand dunk and I got fouled. And that one might be in the top 10. It might be in the Halloween countdown. It was so Grant Hill like. There's just a load of authenticity in that roster that you created, and just a lot of authenticity in that game in general when it comes to NBA action. And like, the game doesn't have as many signatures or even as many animations as a game like NBA 2K24. But that doesn't mean that it can't produce equal or better NBA action, Andrew. And when it comes to getting up and down the floor, when it comes to attacking the rim, when it comes to how the animations play out when you get to the rim, and when it comes to how, you're playing defense, whether it be on the ball or protecting the rim and stuff, like how about those Kareem blocks in the second game when we were doing 80s West versus 80s East? Some big swats at the rim. I think he had 4 blocks in one quarter. And the blocking isn't great in that game. In fact, it's one of the weaker games for blocked shots in the 2K series, but it still has its shining moments in that regard. But yeah, and from an NBA action and atmosphere standpoint and everything, NBA 2K10 is actually one of the best.
And like you said before, it gets overlooked because 2K11 is such a landmark release. And it reminds me of releases like NBA Live 99, overshadowed by Live 2000, but still a great game in its own right. And there's a lot of, I don't want to call them hidden gems because they were very popular. 2K10 outsold NBA Live 10, so it's not like 2K10 is this obscure title that no one's ever played or enjoyed. But it does get overlooked because 2K9 for PC, obviously the first, so it's kind of special to our community for that reason. And then 2K11, such a great game, such a huge jump forward with the retro content and getting Michael Jordan in the game and making some enhancements with gameplay, obviously, that, yeah, it's just kind of overlooked, 2K10.
And I will say this, one thing that's cool about seeing Andrew revisit these games and revisit them with me, which, like, it's always better with another human, Andrew. But he didn't play these 2Ks really back in the day when they were new. So watching Andrew kind of feel his way through a game, these 2K games, is really interesting because sometimes you're learning the controls on the fly, right? Or
I don't remember them.
maybe
yeah,
or don't remember them. Meanwhile, when 2K10, for me, when it was a new game, I can't even tell you how many hours we spent on that game. It was insane. And we played that game throughout its entire cycle up until 2K11 was released. But, one of the things about, these Parsec sessions with you that's so awesome is, sometimes we can revisit games that we didn't play much back in the day, or we can play a game for the first time. That's also happened a couple times. For example, when, you played Double Dribble Playoff Edition with me.
Sure.
You had never played the game before, and that was not your favorite game. But we did play it, and we had a little bit of fun. But it's similar to me, too, with a game like NBA Live 09. So I didn't play Live 09 that much back in the day because we were obsessed with NBA 2K9. We had moved on to the 2K series pretty much full time at that point. But because of these Parsec sessions with the community and yourself and whatnot, and just our vast collections and everything and our resources, I've been able to visit that game a lot recently. I have a much bigger appreciation for it.
Now, that's been really cool, and to do it together has been great as well. Obviously, Parsec has been such a big part of what we've been doing these past few years in particular, and such a great innovation as a remote desktop app, remote desktop software, being able to facilitate gaming the way it does. And 2K10, we were talking about it before we started recording, that you noted I wasn't using a lot of the dribbling moves because I was actually trying to use 2K6 controls, 2K6 isomotion with 2K10. I had forgotten about the face buttons, the B button and the Y button being used for spin and crossover. Used them a bit more in that second game we played with the 80s West versus 80s East, and that was able to pull off a few more moves in that game. But yes, you were definitely carrying us with the crossovers and the great moves in the first game. And it's funny, I've talked about it before, isomotion is not my favorite control scheme. I can say quite definitively that 2K made the right move, adopting right stick dribbling that NBA Live had for years. I'm not sure why they were still holding out by 2K10. It's almost like they didn't want to do what Live was doing because that's Live and we don't like them and they're the enemy and we want to defeat EA Sports and we're the better game, so we're not going to take that idea. So I do think the isomotion controls were weaker, but you can see they're starting to evolve into something a bit better by that point. And once I looked up the controls as we were preparing for that second game, I was able to say, oh, that's right, those they use those face buttons for those moves, so I'll actually make some moves with them. But yeah, you can see how it was evolving over the years. And if there is one thing that I think that 2K has done very well over the past decade, even with some of the games that we're not as fond of, it is establishing that consistent control scheme. Yes, the mechanics differ according to the engine, and there are ideas that we don't like as much, like shot aiming or the loss of certain size-up moves. But I like the consistency that they've had over the past 10 years, or certainly since 2K16, when they brought in the 3-button passing and the well-established with the right-stick dribbling. They were changing it up a lot throughout the 2000s 2Ks, but they did arrive on a basic control configuration, a basic control scheme that does work. But you can see that they're working towards that through the late 2000s 2Ks.
Yeah, I mean, I think if all the 2K titles had been the same and all of them had the right stick dribbling, it'd be boring, right? I think it's kind of fun to revisit titles that had the ISO motion and then, the 2K10, crossover / spin move buttons and everything. It kind of gives those games a fresh feel. It gives you something different than what they've been doing, ever since NBA 2K13. And I also want to say that the right stick dribbling, like basically the 2K has stayed consistent for the most part with their controls, with slight differences, but, stayed pretty consistent for the most part since I'd say 2K15, 2K16, right around there. But I think that they've definitely overcomplicated the controls in many ways. And I don't think that the controls are as good. I don't think that the right stick functions as good as it did in many past titles.
Agreed.
I actually still prefer it in NBA 2K13 actually over NBA 2K24 from a dribbling and and face-up triple threat perspective and whatnot. That is unfortunate, but we're going to try to remain positive on this episode, Andrew, because it's a celebration.
Of course. So, but 2K10, for whatever struggles I had and relearning the controls, I felt like I was picking them up as I was going. And no, I'm very keen to play that game more because those controls do work. I do still prefer right stick dribbling. I think that was the way to go, as I've said. But no, it definitely works. And I see your point that it is fun to revisit something that does something a little bit differently.
Yeah. Also, check out Andrew's NBA 2K14 video. He was playing on his PS4, and it's a 2024 roster for 2K14, and it's the Milwaukee Bucks with Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo versus the Warriors with Chris Paul and Steph Curry. And that video came out awesome. NBA 2K14 graphically and gameplay-wise is just still so good. But check out that video.
No, that was a fun one to play, even though the ending was a bit of a heartbreaker, I'll say.
Yeah. I think the thing is that if we posted videos where we won all the time, that could kind of be boring.
True.
So just to let people know, let our audience know, we do lose to the computer. And like on NBA Live 07, when Adam Morrison,
oh man,
just the worst. That's the worst game we've ever played together.
Oh, easily
as a team.
Yeah.
That second half was painful, and I enjoyed that session because it was with you, a friend, and we were able to laugh at it together. But I don't enjoy NBA Live 07.
Would you ironic enjoyment? Would you say of that session?
Sort of. I mean, we're going to look back on it, and it might be 2-3 years from now, and we'll still say that that's the worst session we've had.
It's not going to be topped until we play Live 07 again. If
that's a big if.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, NBA-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. So as you said, we have some clips to share of our earlier episodes, going right back to the beginning and sharing some classic moments, and we'll be reflecting on some of our favourite episodes as well throughout the course of this celebration, 500 episodes of the NLSC podcast. And I do want to say, Derek, that the early episodes, I'm using a cheap microphone and various headsets over the years. Some of them sound tinny, and I sound tinny and higher pitched as a result. The audio quality was able to jump when I got my Blue Yeti microphone in late 2014. It was actually a 30th birthday present. Shout out to my friends for that. I knew that I was getting more and more into podcasting and bought that for me for my birthday. And of course, I've learned a bit more about editing, and as I've listened to more and more podcasts that other people have done, also realizing what I want to hear when I'm listening to a podcast, and okay, we need to cut that out or get rid of that background noise or whatever. But I'm still very proud of those early episodes, and there's a lot of fun in those episodes and joy, and that's what we bring to our episodes as well, Derek. And that is the key. And you brought it up earlier that having passion for the subject matter, for the topic of your podcast, the topic of your content, you need to have that passion and that enthusiasm, not just chasing algorithms, not just doing it for clout or for money or the grind or whatever, but enjoying what you're doing. And I think that always comes through, and it came through in the early episodes as well.
I absolutely hate fake fighting. I hate staged fighting. I hate staged disagreements.
Well, I like it. So what do you have to say about that?
I'm sure you really enjoyed listening to Skip Bayless and Shannon Sharp.
Oh, sure.
And before that, Bayless and Stephen A. Smith. And then now Shannon Sharp and Stephen A. Smith. You notice that's like just like a revolving door of suck.
Yeah.
Like it's just literally just swapping in and out the same people and all of these staged disagreements and arguments. And it's just the same thing all the time. You know, there's people out there that are told, you know, they're in this industry and they're told that that's what's going to get you clicks, right? Because nobody wants to listen to two people who agree most of the time, right? That's what they're told. Nobody wants to listen to two people who, you know, really, you know, stay positive and agree for the majority of an episode, whether it be a TV show or a podcast and everything. But I'm not going to sit here and fight with you for no reason, Andrew. Like, I'm not going to tell you I can't be able to 07. Like, I'm not going to tell you that. I'm not going to try to, like, you're not going to pretend to like NBA 2K24 and then me say, oh no, it's terrible for these reasons, and then, you know, hope that, oh, hopefully we hit an algorithm and hopefully people start listening and hopefully we create some drama, because I think that's a terrible way to operate. And
Agreed.
That's why TV, podcasting, and radio even oftentimes and whatnot, all of that has really gone down the pooper. I think you would agree. It's
sure.
Just shut it off. You're like, why is this happening? So, no, I love the way we do the show, and I love the way the show has been conducted since the beginning.
And look, we don't agree on absolutely everything. I mean, you felt the 2K10 was awesome, and I felt it was fantastic.
Right, exactly. Yeah, how dare you, Andrew?
Yeah.
How can you say? Is fantastic better than awesome? We're going to have to look that up in the dictionary.
That's a whole show right sure. there. That's a whole episode.
Yeah. We might actually have to debate that, and hopefully we hit an algorithm.
And we'll come to the conclusion that it's both great and awesome. So yeah,
exactly.
Again, differences of opinions, people. So there is an episode number one, hosted by Leftos and Jousming. It covered NBA 2K13 and also NBA Live 13, which was heading towards being cancelled at the time. Do have a clip from that one which I'll play. But before we get to that, there was a test pilot episode hosted by myself and Patrick, P-Dub, released on November 8th, 2010. We interviewed Billy, a.k.a. Big Ball 1-2, who picked up a copy of NBA Elite 11. So that was our test pilot episode, Derek, when we were first looking at getting into podcasting, but it wasn't until a couple of years later that the guys really started the show.
I've never heard this before, so this is going to be new to me.
So let's flash back to that test pilot episode. Hi everyone, and welcome to a test episode of an NLSC podcast. Today I'm joined by Patrick, aka P-Dub. Hi Pat.
Thank you, Andrew.
And today we're also joined by Billy, aka Big Ball 1-2, who you might have seen in the forums, has a copy of NBA Elite 11. Hey Billy.
Hey Andrew, glad to be with you.
Glad to have you here. Today we're just going
Hey Billy.
Hey Pat.
Today we're just going to chat about the game a little bit and get your impressions about it, and
I suppose the first thing that everyone might want to know is why you paid $255 for a game that may never see the light of day.
Yeah, the opportunity was there, so I felt I analyzed the situation. I actually caught the auction just with a couple of hours ago, so I was watching it throughout the latter half of the day, and financially I'm comfortable enough to do something like that. But the motive behind it wasn't necessarily the gameplay or the product itself. I have every single NBA Live game since the series inauguration in 1994. So it really holds. It's a game that has been almost attached to my childhood, growing up playing NBA Lives on the Nintendo 64, and then PlayStation 2, and then the Xbox 360. It's something, and this product and the chance that it, overwhelmingly won't be able to be released to the public. It was a chance that I had to take, and I wouldn't want a product of its value sentimentally to go to somebody who's just looking at the product for a monetary gain. I felt the opportunity was there, and I really almost had to do it. I wanted the community to also be able to experience the game, and hopefully I'll be able to bring extensive looks into the game for the next couple of months. And it's just something I know I'll love and cherish for the rest of my life, and I have absolutely no intention of ever letting go of it, as I could, when it's all said and done, could be one of the only people in the world to actually have every NBA live there is. So it's
Definitely.
a pretty cool thing, and I really thought about it, and I knew I wanted to do it, and fortunately I won it.
So you can hear the audio quality is not the best. I've not developed my podcast voice yet. I'm not comfortable. I'm not comfortable.
Sound like you're in a helicopter with a headset on.
Yeah,
like talking to like the bass.
pretty much. Yeah, I'm definitely not comfortable on the mic yet. So yeah, it's interesting, and that was still a cool idea for our first episode, or the test pilot episode, to have that and talk about NBA Elite 11. But that's cool that Billy Big Ball 1-2 has a very similar attitude to collecting that we do.
Well, I wonder, did he sell it? Because a true original copy of NBA Elite 11, we know how much those are worth now.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if he sold it.
That'd be interesting to reach out and find out. I'm guessing from the sounds of it, he didn't sound like he wanted to part with it. But yeah, that's a lot of money that you could possibly get out of that game now.
No, that is really cool. I think that you can hear the passion in his voice. He loves NBA Live, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he had every game, every physical copy since 1994. So since NBA Live 95. And I think that there's a lot of people actually in the NLSC community still that, are like that try to collect all of the games. One of them is like at B-Ball Video Games. You've seen his collections, Andrew.
Impressive.
It's pretty incredibly impressive, extensive, and whatnot. But yeah, your voice is definitely, like, your mic has improved. I don't know if it's as much of your voice has improved, but your mic has improved.
Oh yeah, it was a tinny little cheap microphone that's just not picking up any bass at all, basically. So yeah.
So I have a question for you before we get to the next clip. Why did you take another 2 to 3 years before you actually started releasing a podcast? Because it sounded like you guys were ready to go.
I think it was just a matter of getting lining up schedules at the time, and I guess at the time in our community we weren't doing as much original content. I hadn't really started my articles yet; they were just one-off articles here and there, still mostly about the modding, I guess, and discussion, which is still a thing we do, quite obviously now in our community. But yeah, it's funny that it did take us a couple of years and the passion of John and Leftos to start that up again. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a good question, and I don't have a good answer, unfortunately.
And like John, aka Jousming, and Leftos obviously work for 2K now. And I wonder if them listening to this episode and this celebration would get them, kind of being like, I want to get back on the mic, and maybe I'll return for another NLSC podcast, because that'd be cool as well.
So speaking of John and Leftos, they hosted the very first episode of the podcast, and it's funny that at the time I actually didn't want to be on the show. I thought, it's going to be great if there's going to be other people just doing that content. I don't have to edit it. That joke's on me there. Having edited over 400, close to 500 episodes now, that's funny to think about. But yeah, I kind of didn't want to get on the mic, and I guess that maybe that to that point, maybe that was me not feeling confident in my podcasting ability.
Yeah, I think that even you and I over 200 episodes, I feel like the shows have been getting better. Right. I think that we were really strong out of the gate because we had a lot of past interests that were the same, we're roughly the same age. We knew where we stood from a basketball gaming and real basketball viewpoint. And a lot of those feelings were very similar. But I think that it all just comes with experience, Andrew, and the comfort level with the people that you are working with. So I think that just with experience, everybody's going to get better.
Oh, chemistry is absolutely important, and I think we did have that instant chemistry, but it's only gotten better over time, and we've worked out the format we want for the show and the content we want to do episode to episode, and the show length, obviously, because it's very easy to get on here and talk for a couple of hours if we didn't manage our time the way a podcaster should, quite frankly. But speaking of chemistry, John and Leftos definitely had it. This is the first 3 minutes of episode 1, the official start, I guess, of the podcast, released August 22nd, 2012, hosted by Leftos and Zhao Sming.
Hey guys, this is Zhao Sming, and I'm here with Leftos, and we're here to do the first NLSC podcast, and we're just going to kind of talk about some of the things that are happening with the community and with 2K13 and some other stuff. So, Leftos?
Hello, everybody. Okay, so this is our first try, so excuse us if we're not the podcast you were expecting us to be. Joe is going to start with some news from what's been happening in NLSC lately. See if you're significant enough to be mentioned. So that should keep you excited for the weekly podcast.
Yeah.
And that should get us some nice ass kissing in the forums.
Indeed.
Okay.
So let's start off with the most important news of the week. I, Zhao Sming. No. I mean, we got some good stuff going on this week in the NLSC. It looks like in the future we're going to have a couple more contributors added to the contributor group. I just kind of went through and looked at what everyone was doing, and I can tell you that it sounds like for a fact Nummeat, the kind of the developer behind the Ultimate Base roster with Hawk 23. It looks like he's probably going to be added, and we got a couple of live guys, and we're looking to have a pretty strong team going into 2K13, which is going to be ideal in my opinion. What else? Sean John is going insane with the globals. He and MLP 1111, I believe it is. They're just doing great work with their graphics enhancements, and hopefully they'll get the values of the global to Leftos here so we can all make tweaks like that soon.
Yeah, you'd love that, wouldn't you?
I would love it. And I would only love it because I use that global that has the full player reflections underneath the players and not just the one that are cut off on the knees.
Yeah.
So I've just been dying to get my hands on those values to put them into the global that I like.
Yeah, that didn't work out that well, though, did it? I mean, the reflections ended up being too strong. Yeah.
Well, that's actually because of the quartz people were using. Because some of the quartz can be modded to show more of the reflections.
Okay.
So if you use the default quartz like I've been using, I'm sorry, patchers, I'm still using the default quartz and then the quartz that I made. I'm a jerk. So, those quartz, it actually looks very realistic, and then I can actually limit the reflections a little bit, but I never got around to it.
Yeah, so maybe if we make the full reflection globals the norm, maybe people will start modding quartz based on that. Or maybe that's just wishful thinking.
Well, I think it's wishful thinking for 2K13 if we find it quick and get it out. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I'll have enough time to make all 30 quartz.
We have a lot of people working on the courts this year, and although Joe James went ahead and did all the 30 uniforms, the jerseys himself, we have a lot of different people working on the courts, and
Mythbuster, he's been key all year. If I was to pick one of them out, Mythbuster did a great job this year with the courts.
Yeah.
So, what a flashback to 2012. Calling modding patching, as we used to back in the day. There's a lot more NBA Live modders, patchers still active. Looking ahead to modding 2K13, And of course, the instant chemistry between John and Leftos is, what a flashback.
So I have a few things to say about this. First, how welcoming is John Jousmay? As his voice, like, well, he's a New England guy like me, right? We're all welcoming,
of course,
Andrew. But he's also a Celtics fan. We both grew up as Celtics fans and whatnot. But yeah, super welcoming. He's obviously really into the material. I think that Leftos is funny, the way he started out that podcast, especially with the, we may not sound podcasty enough, and even some harsh words. If you're privileged to be part of the conversation, basically. I think that's just kind of a funny way to start the show. So pretty good icebreaker there from Leftos. And I also want to say that NBA 2K13, NBA 2K12, and NBA 2K14, what a time for modding, Andrew. Like the stuff that they're talking about modding courts, modding globals, modding things like reflections and how those show up in the game and everything. It was such a big deal back then. And I was also super into global mods, especially with NBA 2K14, and just giving like the skin textures a different look, adding more muscle to the players, using Lagoa's globals, which were my favorite, like version 6.0 and 6.1, and that added better progressive sweat, and then using the amazing scoreboards that were created by, I think it was Eric's or Xrix,
yes,
and all the presentation mods, all the courts, Pep's jerseys, all the amazing cyber faces, the huge roster mods by URB and UBR, etc. Blown away by that time of basketball video game modding. I still can't believe how much work the community was doing. So it's really cool to hear, a show from the golden age of 2K modding.
Yeah, that was the explosion, wasn't it? Because we had the tools in place. We had a few years to develop those tools and people getting into the community. Leftos obviously joining the team as not just a modder, but also a tool creator. And having that knowledge and having those tools to start modding straight away, to hit the ground running with mods when 2K13 came out, was such a difference to previous years, because we'd had so many years of NBA Live modding where, if nothing else, we knew how to edit the rosters because they were all coming out in DBF format. The roster save files were in DBF format, and we knew how to at least open them with DB Commander. No longer needed to have the toolkits or a special editor to do that with the rosters. We could do that with a readily available tool that was just compatible through the years. And then, as they weren't really changing the graphics format year to year, we were able to make mods much quicker. And again, having that knowledge, that pre-existing knowledge to apply to a game that was very moddable already. We were starting to get that with 2K13. So, yeah, a very exciting time. And yes, a little bit of a hangover of the last days of people really passionately updating NBA Live as well.
Yeah, I think that one of the cool things about that segment was the fact that they did highlight the modding community, right? They were using names in the modding community. They were giving shout outs and everything. And I think we could do a little bit more of that on this podcast. However, I do want to point out that the activity in the forum in relation to modding really has died down.
It has.
Right? With the majority of the modding community out there, either selling their mods, basically putting their mods behind paywalls, or they're on sites that are very hard to access, or it's, like this, if I get 500 likes for this mod, I'll release it, right? Or make sure you PM me for a mod, stuff like that. So I think that the dynamics around modding and how the modding community works is night and day different compared to the way it was in early 2010s, because you had a little bit of that back then, but not even close to the amount. It was basically free open source mods and the community really trying to work together towards a common goal, and that common goal was making those games the best they could be, right? And whatnot. So I do think it's cool that they did that. Also with NBA Live, obviously NBA Live 10 was for the PS3. So it never came out on PC. Same with like NBA Live 09, NBA, etc. So we weren't able to mod those games. But like you stated, there were still some people pretty active. And I know, like, what was it, Esprat?
Yes.
and whatnot with NBA Live 2004 and whatnot, there were still people that were pretty active in modding NBA Live 08, NBA Live 2004, even Live 2003 and whatnot back then. So I do think that it's cool to hear some of those old shows as well where they're still talking about NBA Live mods being released.
Oh, for sure. And I was still in that scene myself, updating the rosters for NBA Live 2005 through 08. So we definitely had a handful of people still doing that. But no, I think that was a really good start for the NLSC podcast. And again, in the early days, I was quite content for John and Leftos to do that, for that to be their show. And I was saying, no, I don't want to get involved. I'll do the news post for you and everything if you want me to handle that side of things. But no, you guys go ahead and do the show. And of course, the podcast was meant to be a weekly show, as it still is. And unfortunately, they had some problems linking up their schedules. So John couldn't make a few recordings, and Leftos wasn't able to line up his schedule with John, as I said. So they missed a few weeks of shows. So Leftos, badgering me, said, "Would you like to step in and host the show and join the show?" And I was a bit reluctant. But episode 7, I made my NLSC podcast debut, and of course, Derek, I have a clip.
I'm Leftos, as you may know from my very cute voice, and today I'm joined by...
Jasmine doing an Australian accent. Actually, no, it's Andrew finally getting onto the podcast.
Yeah, you fooled me.
Very confusing.
So we have a lot of stuff to talk about this podcast. It's been quite some time, so there's the release of NBA 2K13 to go through, the lack of any release of NBA Live 13, and the actual cancellation this time. We can use that word without having Jasmine throwing fits about how it's not cancelled. We have many members of the community to praise for their work, for their constant modding work, and the first few weeks of the NBA season, which I will be trying to avoid discussing, because I'm a Pistons fan, and we know what's been going on with the Pistons. So, yeah, let's start with something more positive. Let's start with the release and our thoughts on and impressions on NBA 2K13. So, I'm going to give the mic to Andrew. So, Andrew, let's start with the main points. What would you say in a few sentences are your main impressions from the first month and a half we've had with the game?
Well, so far I'm really enjoying it. Actually, it's probably the most fun I've had with an NBA 2K game. I'd go so far as to say that. The new controls are probably the big thing for me, coming from NBA Live for so many years. Actually being able to use the right stick to dribble, definitely a big positive for me that's worked out quite well. I like the responsiveness, the basic animations there as well. It's all seem to come together. Plays a pretty good game of basketball, though we do have some issues with the play calling and how many times the CPU seems to run plays. But yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it so far.
So far, I'm really enjoying it so far. That's some good luck.
I was going to say, though, before that, Andrew, you were a veteran. Right there. You sounded like an absolute veteran.
See, I
thought you sounded great.
I'm self-critical. I listen to that and think, that is somebody who is not comfortable on the microphone.
Yeah, I still think you sounded... I still think it was a strong performance. And I also want to point out that Leftos is a natural.
Yes.
We have to agree. Like, he's funny. He's just naturally funny. He summarized the show beautifully, basically letting listeners know what's to come. And it is cool to hear him, talk about how you were going to touch on the NBA season, because you and I do that now. We touch on topics related to the now NBA, whether it was when, the Nuggets won the NBA championship, or how we feel about, certain debates that are going on in the real world of basketball, et cetera. So that was cool to hear Leftos do that as well. And also 2K13, how many times have we talked about that on the show? It sounds like you loved that game right out of the gate, and you still love it now.
Yeah, and my thoughts on it haven't really changed over the past 11 years. I still like it because of the dribbling. That is what really got me into the 2K series, as I've said. It's right there. The proof is right there in my initial impressions that I put out there. And yeah, of course, the cancellation of Live 13, we went into that on that show, and that was disappointing at the time, obviously. We wanted Live to come back, and look how Live struggling has got us into this situation with basketball gaming over a decade later.
Yeah, and it's funny because even now in 2023, we're having a similar conversation about NBA Live. about that series, about the fact that, they went another year without releasing a game, etc. And at that point, when they didn't release NBA Live 13, they hadn't released an NBA Live since NBA Live 10. So a very similar situation, even a decade later.
And that show came out in November 20th, 2012, and episode 1 was August 22nd, 2012. So once again, a few weeks had been missed there. We wanted to get into the habit of having a weekly show, and it continued to get an audience over those early weeks, and there was pretty positive reception to some of the early episodes. But there was also some snark from forum veterans, Derek, who they weren't really interested in the podcast. They were losing interest in basketball gaming in general. And look, to me, there's nothing worse than a long-time community member who's lost interest in the community, in the hobby that we're interested in, and they kind of won't gracefully move on. They just want to stick around and snark. And Leftos actually confronted a couple of them and said, okay, do you actually have any positive feedback, or do you have any constructive feedback, I should say, about the show? And some of them did at least offer up some constructive criticism, and others just said, oh, you talk about the dreadful topic of basketball gaming. Like, why are you here? Why are you here?
Right,
So,
it's the NLSC. What do you expect us to talk about?
exactly, yeah. And of course, we had the real basketball talk as well. But yeah, so Leftos was great in those early weeks as well, of standing up for the show and confronting people and saying, look, if you have constructive feedback, let us know. But if we're not the show for you, then there's not much we can do. But we've had some great support from the start, and that continued to build over time. So that was really nice.
Yeah, I mean, people's lives change. Right.
Sure.
Interests change, responsibilities change. A lot of people don't have time anymore for basketball, video games, or, to operate in the capacity of a forum, right? Like, making forum posts, talking about mods and everything. But just because you've lost that interest, don't, try to tear down the site. And I know, about some of the situations that you're talking about. In fact, even since I came on board as a team member, we've had a couple situations where, people kind of abruptly and not gracefully left the forums and tried to tear down the NLSC on the way out. And it just doesn't make any sense to act that way. It's silly and it's over dramatic, and it's just uncalled for.
Yeah, I mean, if you lose interest or not happy with the situation, just what's the saying? It's not an airport. You don't need to announce your departure.
Yeah, exactly. Also, the point is, like you stated, not everybody's going to like the show. We know that not everybody wants to tune in to our podcasts that we do now, that we've been doing since 2019 together. And if you have constructive criticism about the show or ways that we can improve it, we'd love to hear that. But let's have an honest, mature conversation about it. Don't kick and scream and insult, etc.
It's much like giving constructive feedback to the development team. I mean, just telling them the game sucks doesn't tell them how to make it better.
Right, exactly. NBA Live 07 sucks.
That too.
But I will also offer up ways to improve it.
Well, I mean, it's how you come across as a subject matter expert, right? To actually demonstrate that you can critique and that you can make those suggestions.
Exactly. And we try to do that on this show, right?
Of course.
That's what we do. We talk about the good and bad in relation to video games. And we also ask for the community's input in a way where it's not leaning one way or the other, right? Like not leaning towards NBA Live favoritism or NBA 2K favoritism or any other company. It's supposed to be fair and balanced, and everybody's welcome to, critique and give feedback, etc.
So we had a few other people from the NLSC team in the early years join us as guest co-hosts, and sometimes they'd be on the panel, and that was something we looked to do as well early on. And of course, get guests. All good podcasts want to get some great guests from time to time. And at the time, Dazar hadn't joined the NBA 2K development team yet. He was still heading up Sim Nation. Guess he still is in many ways, but from the perspective of a developer these days. And he joined us for a couple of shows for an interview, a once-off special, but then joined us during episode 29, which is our longest show to date, Derek. It was released on May 16th, 2013. It was hosted by myself, Leftos, Jousming, Arcane, Ben, of course, Eric, and Pat, P-Dub, with Dazar joining us as a special guest halfway through. Ran for just over 3 hours and 11 minutes. It was kind of a wild show, but one of the best moments from that show was Sim Nation president Dazar having some fun and friendly banter with Jousming, the president of Arcade Nation. And that clip I share with you and our listeners now.
And this is why I've been waiting and waiting for my chance to get into a call with you. And I was so sad that we missed out on that first special, because that is me. I am the Antichrist to you, if you will. I am that bastard that likes to put it on casual, put it on rookie. I want to see dunks, and I want to play blacktop mode. I want to see crossovers. I want to see off the glass alley-oops every damn possession. And I have been waiting. And when we heard the news that you're going to be late today and everything, I was like, no, it's not going to happen. It's going to happen like last time where I couldn't make the Rebound podcast. And, we could go into this. You and I could go into this for a while, because I have been waiting for years to talk to you about that kind of stuff. And I agree with you, and I know where you're coming from. And I've obviously been in the community for as long as I have. I know exactly not exactly, but I understand your guys' mindset, the simulation or the sim nation, and wanting to make sure that you play the game that's challenging and everything. And I like the challenge, but I just want to. You said it, and that is me, what you said, and we will have to get into that at some point. I'm just saying that.
Burn him with fire.
Hey man, I'm all for it. And listen, I understand that there are people that like to play games differently. I completely understand that. And my only thing is that we're playing an NBA basketball game. It should not be an affront to anyone if the game actually plays on one level like NBA basketball. And that's all I got to say. It shouldn't be an affront. And I, for one, think that we can coexist. There's this little thing called a setting. Now, the only place where you and I are going to get into fisticuffs is if you want simulation mode to play like arcade. Now, I can't have that. I don't know where you're living, but I'll come find you and we'll duke that one out. But as long as you have separate areas, I'm like, yes, dunk every possession.
But you know what? And the thing that almost got me banned on Operation Sports was I made a post that ended up getting deleted. That when I first played 2K, I think it was 2K7. The first thing I said was, "Wow, this game is a really fun arcade game." I don't know who deleted it. It got deleted, and there was trolling, and people were coming after me. And I am with you. It is much easier to make the game play arcadey and quote unquote my fun. It is much easier to do that with any game than it is to make any game behave and play sim. So yes, I think the developers, Leftos, need to make sure that the game is played sim. And then I will gladly come in with my street courts and blacktop mode and street mods on the PC and everything and screw it up as much as I want to. But you can make people like him happy.
Jousting always representing Arcade Nation and Street Ball.
I love that conversation. And what stands out to me there is what John likes to do when he's talking about, crossovers and dunking in traffic and everything. That's a part of sim basketball, Andrew.
Sure.
That stuff happens in the NBA. That's, some of people's favorite highlights. I think what it is John wants it to happen just a little bit more than it happens in real life, which is where the arcade element comes in. But what he's asking for in reality is just a game that produces great highlights. And we're still very much about that on the NLSC. You and I have many matchups or co-op sessions where the game is just being played in a sim atmosphere, sim element, right? Whether it's the settings we're using or that game just plays that way, even just on the default settings. And, we're using their players to their strengths, where we're running real plays, all of that. But then we also have the sessions, which sometimes are the most enjoyable highlights, where it is a little bit more arcade leaning, where it's a little bit more unrealistic, right? And sometimes those are the videos that get the most comments, the most views, and are the most fun. So I'm both team Zhao Sming and team Dazar when it comes to, what they're looking for in a basketball video game, because I can enjoy the game both ways. And I think that you're kind of the same way.
Oh, for sure. And actually, as that conversation went on, John kind of realized that he was perhaps more sim than he thought. Maybe a bit of a sim arcade hybrid gamer, if you will. We talk about the sim arcade hybrid of games, but within the preferences of gamers themselves, you also have people who are a bit lean both ways or enjoy elements of both. And John kind of came to the realization that he was kind of that way. And as you say, those highlights are part of basketball. It's the frequency, perhaps, that hardcore sim heads don't want to see as often because it's not sim to see that many dunks or scores that are that high or whatever. Of course, that has changed these days over the years as the rules have favored offense over defense more often. But yeah, he kind of came to the realization during that conversation that he was a bit of a hybrid as far as being a sim arcade gamer.
Here's my opinion. I think that the majority of basketball gamers are sim arcade hybrid players.
Agreed.
I really, really do believe that. I believe that they want the sim elements. They want the signature shots for the players, right? They want some real basketball elements to the gameplay. But at the end of the day, they just want to flat out have fun on the sticks, Andrew. So I think that John's play style, I think that that actually represents the majority of basketball gamers. So it's cool to hear him talk about it.
I think so too. I think there's been times when I've played 2K over the years, especially around that time when it was really focused on being a more realistic game and really focused on being that NBA sim. I realized some of my strategies, they're not sim. I've always thought always thought of myself as a sim gamer, but I'm not playing very sim right now. That was a bit of a wake up call for me.
I think that a definition of sim could be different depending on the person you're talking to.
Sure.
Right? Because I don't think it's sim to run different plays, 70 to 80% of the time during, a basketball gaming session. I don't think that, but some people consider that sim. My idea of sim basketball is operating more with instincts and getting the ball off the board and outletting it and running the break. And, maybe there's off ball screens and whatnot that free up players, but mostly operating on instinct, going to mismatches, stuff like that. I think that is more in line with sim basketball. So I think a lot of times it just depends on who you're talking to, because I've seen videos of somebody who said, oh, it's a sim matchup between these two teams, and they're just standing there at the top of the key and running a play every single possession, and none of the game is in the flow, really. It's just running plays every time down. But then I've seen other people like you and I who say, oh, this is a sim style game that we played on, say, NBA Live 10 or NBA 2K14, and it's fast, free flowing, and we mostly only run quick plays, right? So it is cool to hear them talk about that. But at the end of the day, it all depends on who you talk to, the way that they define sim basketball.
Definitely agree. And of course, there is a lot of freelance basketball, and that is something that Dazar, in his role as a developer, as a gameplay developer over there at Visual Concepts, has been really into that and about enhancing the play calling, but also freelance play calling as well.
Exactly. And I know that, John, Jasmine, and Leftos and Vlad from the forum and Razor, they all have different responsibilities working within 2K. And, Razor does cyber faces. I know John was doing my team for a while, et cetera. It is really cool to see not only that they got hired by 2K, but that all of these people are still working for him.
Definitely. That it's been a dream job that they've had that opportunity and wanted to keep working there. It speaks to how much they enjoy that job. Video game development is a tough industry. You hear about a lot of people being burned out because of the crunch, because of the other pressures of that industry. But for them to still be there, over 10 years later for Leftos, that just shows how much they love that job and how passionate they are about it. So that is really cool. It is really cool that our community has produced people who are now working on the games. And of course, that actually started with our founder, Tim Cherner. And Tim joined us actually for the 100th episode, Derek, way back in the day, and reflected on his time with the site and also being an NBA Live dev. So yeah, I've actually got a clip from that 100th episode as well, where Tim and I were reflecting on the history of the community.
There's so many things to think back. I can't actually believe that it's almost like 20 years that I started this way back when I was studying in Germany and like first started playing NBA Live and first started getting interested in just NBA basketball. And remember like the first iterations of the site were hosted at the university on the university web pages where I was studying back then, and that's kind of like how it all started.
I remember when it became Tassoff.com and then eventually NBA-Live.com. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been around for a while too, and certainly was a great fan, and that's why it was so exciting for me back in the day when you came to me when you were going to EA and saying, "Hey, you want to run, your favorite website?" And it was a bit daunting, but hopefully, I'd like to think I've done you guys proud because I always enjoyed the work that you did. So that's been my moving forward, always wanting to do that same kind of content that you've done.
Yeah, well, thanks. I mean, I think you've done a fantastic job. I remember when I got the offer from EA back then, and I wanted to make sure that I leave the site in good hands because it was something that was like very dear to me, and like I had put like a lot of time and I've put a lot of effort and passion into it, and I didn't want to just abandon it just by moving. Sort of like, I mean, the great thing is like it was one of the I guess like vehicles that allowed me to actually like turn my passion into a profession. And I just didn't want to sort of like turn a cold shoulder. And I remember that there were like, obviously the NLSC wasn't like the only NBA Live fan site at the time, but I think it was like by far, even back then, by far like the biggest. But I remember that you had the number 1-2 site, but you also, I can't remember all the details, but I remember that you had some original content and whatnot on it. So I figured, like that, like this seems to be by far like the best person to take over. And I think I know I'm right. I made the right decision back then to like go and approach you. I think that all worked out pretty well.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I used to run the NBA Live domain for people, the NLD, who are newer to the site and wonder what I used to do before I got that. And I did. I used to do columns and such, and of course I've got my Friday 5 and everything now. I still like doing that original content as well as the patching and this podcast, of course. So yeah, I just remember how much I enjoyed coming to the site and seeing the new stuff every day. And we actually haven't missed a daily update on the NLSC since December 31st, 2006. I wanted to make sure there's been something there every day.
That is pretty impressive.
So that streak remains unbroken, Derek, of daily updates on the NLSC. But it was my honor to get Tim on the show and to talk about the origins of the site. And I actually met him at a community event, the NBA Live 07 community event, the first one I attended. So that was really cool to meet him, actually meeting somebody from the community on the other side of the world. It was very flattering for him to compliment my work like that and to know that that he was comfortable with his decision to have me take over the site all those years ago. And you should be incredibly proud, Andrew. I mean, the Monday tip-off, way back Wednesday, the Friday 5, and whatnot, you have kept that going week in, week out for well over a decade now. And I just think the consistency is unreal. I think the community really appreciates that. It really does keep the site going. And I love hearing the passion in his voice about, his time with the site, why he started the site, the fact that he was so passionate about basketball video games and he was able to turn that into, somewhat of a career and whatnot. And that's just super cool to hear. But yeah, I'm glad that you stuck around. I'm glad that you took over the site because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be friends right now, probably, because we never would have met because you live on the opposite side of the world. That's right. Yeah. Just, the whole butterfly effect. What could have been if I hadn't taken over? Would someone else have continued to run it right through to 2023 and looking to do it for indefinitely as I am? So it's interesting to think about, but at the same time, I don't want to think about it because I am proud of what I've accomplished with the site, and I'm proud that we're still around. I'm proud that you and I are still creating content, and I'm very grateful for the support that we still have all these years later. I mean, the site's been going since 1996. So how many sites are still around that aren't for big corporations or sports leagues that are still around since 1996? Not many. Exactly. And it's fun, right? Yeah. Like being able to do this is fun. Not only running the site, but researching
items for content, connecting on Parsec and playing the games, uploading videos to the YouTube, doing this podcast and being able to talk about basketball and basketball gaming on a weekly basis. I know that I'm thankful for it. I know that I really appreciate being part of the NLSC. And what some people may not know is that I was a part of it way back in like 1998. Because I was getting mods and the editor and whatnot for NBA Live 98, Andrew. So I officially became a member again on the forum back in 2013. So that's when I came back. But, I go back to the 90s with the NLSC as well.
No, and it's really cool to hear that. It's cool when people from the early days just register an account again in the forum to say, oh, you guys are still around, and reminisce about the old days and offer up their compliments. So it is cool that we have such a long history. And I mentioned the NBA Live domain, which was my fan site that was very much inspired by the NLSC, the NBA Live Series Center, as it was at the time. And, of course, that was hosted at Yahoo Geocities, and that's gone now. We've outlasted, Yahoo's Geocities.
Isn't that unbelievable? I built websites back in the day as well. We used AOL Press. Did you ever use that?
Didn't use that one, no. I was on AOL Messenger. I was on AIM for a while, but I was mostly MSN Messenger and ICQ back in the day, actually.
Yeah, the website creation tool that I used the most back then was AOL Press, and it was just this super basic website builder, but the ease of use was unmatched. It was so easy to create a site. You could just create a website in one afternoon, like a fan site, etc. Have a guest book on there and everything. Put background music to the page. Remember background music to web pages?
Yes, the midis,
and background music to your MySpace. I know you had one, Andrew.
I did, yeah.
I know that you had a MySpace with background music. But yeah, that stuff was so fun back in the day.
And doing something special for landmark episodes is obviously something we're doing right now for the 500th, and we did it for our 100th as well. As I said, we wanted to get some guests on there, and getting Tim on there was very special. Between then and the next episode we're going to talk about, which is the interview with Tim Kitzrow, from June 11th to 15th, 2013, Leftos, Ben, Arcane, and I did 4 E3 2013 specials, where we did a podcast released 4 consecutive days, or I think 4 out of 5 days, recapping the E3, when that was a much bigger event than it is now. Only time we ever did that. It was something fun for the time. Probably overkill. People did tune in. We got good listenership for each day of those podcasts, but it was certainly a grind to do. Ben, who had been staying up very late to watch some of the pressers, had fallen asleep. He fell asleep during the recording, as I think Leftos and I brought that up when he joined us a couple of years ago. That was a funny moment when we threw it to Ben and he'd drifted off. But that was something different, covering E3 like that, and we can't really do that these days because that event isn't what it used to be. But those special event podcasts were fun to do, and it was experimental back then.
That gives me an idea, Andrew. You and I should do a 24-hour NLSC podcast where we're on the air for 24 hours straight live, and maybe we do it for a charity or something like that. Just kidding. I don't think you could stay up for that long.
Yeah.
But I always thought that stuff was kind of cool, like the special episodes, whether it be on TV or podcast related, where they stay on the air just for an abnormal amount of time.
So we're not going to do that Twitch stream to our A-holes and D-bags?
No, but we need to start recruiting for those two groups, Andrew.
So, Derek, one of the biggest gets for the NLSC podcast was my interview with Tim Kitzrow, the legendary voice of NBA Jam, of course. And, that was such a thrill to talk to somebody who was a voice of my childhood.
Yeah, he helped shape your childhood, Andrew.
For sure.
How much fun did Tim Kitzrow and NBA Jam provide you during those years? And here's the funny part. Not just those years in your childhood, but also your adult years.
Definitely.
Because he's also the voice of NBA Jam on Fire Edition as well. So, I think that I just love that Tim is still flying the flag for that game. I love the fact that he still shows up for appearances, with a NBA Jam arcade machine sometimes present at these appearances. And he's still, yelling boom shakalaka into the mic on all of his interviews and whatnot. It is so cool that in 2023, even though we haven't had an NBA Jam game since NBA Jam on Fire Edition in 2010, that he is still flying the flag for NBA Jam.
I love it. And from the moment I called him, he answers the phone, and I introduce myself, say, "Hey, it's Andrew," and there's a bit of a pause, and then he breaks into it, and I'm not going to imitate him because I simply can't. But then he's just like, "From across the Atlantic, from down under, boom shakalaka, how you going, man?" And I'm like, "Oh, fanboying out at this time," but that does come across in the interview. But I am very proud of that interview, and it was just a great conversation, and he's great with stories.
Andrew fainted.
Close to it.
And they had to start recording again.
Close enough to it. But we do have some clips from that show now, and again, telling all the stories of the history of Jam and his involvement with it. So let's start with clip number 1.
So it was really tough. It had to be minimal. It couldn't be long lines, and the gameplay was so quick that you had to keep things brief. Everything was scripted for all the games. There certainly I improvise on the spot. Sometimes in the studio and riff, and I come up and I'll write stuff like, the day of or while we're in the session or on a break. But when it got to, the biggest difference is when we got to Blitz, now we're starting to actually sound like a broadcast. We brought in a color commentator for me, but the play-by-play was rich and it was more in-depth. When we got to Slugfest and NHL hits, very, very deep. 17,000, I think, calls in NHL hits. I wrote all the script for MLB Slugfest and most of it for NFL Blitz as well. So it really went from just a carnival barker, one-liners, he's on fire, boom shakalaka, from downtown to, a more of a broadcaster tone. But then I started to develop my own style a lot more with Blitz because I didn't have to be that high-pitched Marv Albert style. I had a grittier, welcome to NFL Blitz. Oh, he just ripped his head off. No, it was just his helmet.
Just so fun to hear him riffing like that and doing the Jam announcer voice, to me over the phone.
I also love how he, on a dime, can say lines from games that came out 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
That he did commentary on. And I do love how he talks about the difference there between calling, an NBA Jam game as opposed to, say, NFL Blitz. So, yeah, there's definitely a difference there.
And, of course, he is Mr. Boom Shakalaka. That is the iconic line from NBA Jam. And it's not the most original question, but it's kind of the one you have to ask whenever you have Tim Kitzrow on the show, the origins of it. And I did, and here is the clip from that. The iconic word, of course, and you've mentioned it a few times, and I never get sick of hearing it, is Boom Shakalaka, of course. Is that your creation, or is it kind of like Cowabunga, where it's been around and you've just popularized it?
Well, I'm just going to say it's my creation. Let's leave it at that. I think that after all these years, there's various different stories and the folklore, but in the end, I'm just going to take credit for it. It was certainly, I think if you do enough research, you find out that Boom Shakalaka, there was even Caribbean song with Boom Shakalaka in it, whatever. Sly and the Family Stone was in the chorus of I Want to Take You Higher, was not saying boom, but they said boo shakalaka laka, boo shakalaka laka, and Bill Murray and Stripes does it. So it was just a phrase that was out there, and one of the guys in the sound department, said, hey, why don't you say that, And once I said it, though, the cool thing was it became synonymous with, the dunk and, with NBA Jam, and it's certainly, now it's everywhere and in commercials and advertising. So it's pretty cool the way that one phrase, that one word stuck. And it's the perfect onomatopoeia. Go look that up on Wikipedia. The boom hits the rim, and the shakalaka is the rim shaking afterwards. Boom shakalaka.
And like you say, he just goes right into it.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear. Also, he should just get paid every time somebody says boom shakalaka.
Right? Yeah.
They should be like, all right, Tim Kitzrow gets a piece of this pie because we use the word that he made famous.
I mean, if Paris Hilton can trademark That's Hot, surely Tim Kitzrow can trademark boom shakalaka.
Well, she didn't succeed with that. Just like LeBron didn't succeed with trying to do a with Taco Tuesdays. Neither of them has succeeded.
So another clip from that interview that I also put to a video a while back for Halloween was the story of the haunted, the so-called haunted NBA Jam cabinet that was playing the Drazen Petrovic sound over and over again, not long after his tragic passing. And here's that clip.
When the game came out, this player, Drazen Petrovic, was in the game, and he was tragically killed in a car accident. And maybe couple hundred games are in the factory, and after people are leaving work and the lights are off, they were walking through there, and the cabinet just started like going, Petrovic, like the game like turned on and started saying his name. And there are a couple of other stories, if you look online too, and Mark will corroborate this, where arcade owners said that the same thing happened, like for no reason, like it wasn't in attract mode, and that Petrovic and certainly wasn't an attract mode feature, but suddenly there would just be like, it's on and it's me yelling, Petrovic, and it is real and it's documented.
It's one of those eerie legends of basketball gaming, and it's obviously, I don't believe that it is a supernatural thing, Derek. I would suggest that it is just a weird quirk of the self-testing routine that it's playing that audio clip, but certainly creepy that it happened after his tragic passing.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of readers and listeners, want to hear about. They want to hear about those quirky things that happen in video games, or even the mysterious things that can take place. And that situation is absolutely fascinating.
And there was something about NBA Jam Tournament Edition that I wanted to ask Tim. Been wondering about it for over 20 years, so I had the opportunity, and it wasn't necessarily the answer I was expecting, but it was still very cool to ask him. And here's that clip. People may remember in NBA Jam Tournament Edition, you could play with a rookie squad by default, or once you defeat all 27 teams at the time, that you can actually unlock the All-Star squad. And during the tonight's matchup screen, there's a rather interesting sound clip, which I'll just add to the show right now.
Showtime! Tonight's matchup, versus Cavaliers.
Now, that's quite interesting sound effect there.
Well, I don't remember doing LSD during any of the recording sessions, but I was always sober at the recording sessions. But that's a new one to me. I don't think I ever knew that existed. I never heard it. So we're gonna have to chalk that up to spilling your coffee and I was on fire.
I think that's the canon.
That's fun. That you stumped me on that one, man. Maybe maybe I'll call John Hay, who did the script, and say, what the hell was that?
So no definitive answer there, but a wonderful joking answer, and yeah, to be able to bring that up with him and give him a laugh like that was really fun.
That's a wild animal. There's no way that was Tim Kitzrow that made that audio. That is an actual wild animal that they put in front of a mic. That is funny, and I've actually heard that in the game before, and I think my brothers and I have had a laugh at it.
So yeah, you can go back and listen to that whole interview with Tim. That is episode 280 of the NLSC podcast, and what a joy it was, what a pleasure it was to have him on the show. And I also want to say, Derek, that when I reached out to him, he couldn't have been more gracious, more enthusiastic to do it. Didn't try to big league me at all. Didn't make any demands or anything. Just said, can you call me over the phone to do it, which I can still do through Skype. And just so generous with his time, generous with his stories, and was such a delight to talk to. And you and I have had a person who did big league us when we tried to get an interview, and this person was nowhere near as big of a deal as Tim Kitzrow. So for Tim to do that and be so humble and so willing to do the show, just made me such a bigger fan of him. And just shout out to Tim Kitzrow, not just for the awesome work he's done at NBA Jam, of course, which has been such a big part of our childhood and adulthood with basketball gaming, but for being such a cool guest. And, I'll do the cheap plug. Check out his Who Said What Now if you want to get a custom answering machine message or intro to your podcast or anything like that. Does podcast drops. You can check that out at whosaidwhatnow.com.
He should have been intimidated by you, Andrew. Andrew of the NLSC.
Oh, I mean,
I'm just kidding. No, No. From every interview I've heard him in, the way he interacts on social media, hearing him speak at the events that are for him and NBA Jam and whatnot, he couldn't be more gracious and more human, right? Because in a position where, he is the voice of NBA Jam, he's a video game legend. He could obviously be a snob, right? And probably get away with it, or he could come off a certain way. But he's definitely not like that, and I appreciate that.
So that was 2019 that we did that interview. Once again, go back and check that out if you haven't heard it. I am very proud of that interview. But later in 2019, I got a new co-host, Derek, and that's you.
And our audio wasn't strong for our early episodes either, because we hadn't really got it figured out yet. I was taking the podcasts on my phone. My volume was often higher than yours, so like it sounded like I was screaming into a microphone. But yeah, those early shows were super fun for me. I had no nerves in relation to recording them with you. And I think the biggest reason is because I already knew from talking with you on the forums that you and I were going to hit it off, right?
Yeah.
That we were going to have similar stances in relation to, real life basketball and the virtual hardwood. And that, I had listened to a couple shows before I came on and did my first show with you. And I could tell that your demeanor was going to be very welcoming and easy to get along with on the show.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, one of the biggest compliments I've ever been paid in my life is they said, Andrew, you can talk to anyone. And yeah, I pride myself on that. I think that is an important ability to have, that you can just have a conversation with anyone and have that instant chemistry. Of course, not everybody has the chemistry that we do, that I like to think that we've displayed on the show over the years. But no, that was the biggest compliment I've ever been paid.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been going strong ever since. 200 episodes, recording week in, week out, never short of content, never short of laughs, never short of finding something interesting to talk about.
And of course, it wasn't that long after our first episode together that we did a really big show, actually a two-part show, episodes 301 and 302, our two-part 25th anniversary of NBA Live celebrations.
And that was a blast. I mean, you and I both grew up with NBA Live as our primary source for basketball video games. And, we were at times dabbling in other series. Obviously, I had, the original NBA 2K, NBA 2K1, 2K2, 2K3, etc. I had a Dreamcast. I was playing the other PlayStation titles. I was playing Inside Drive and whatnot. But NBA Live was king. NBA Live was primary. And for the majority of the basketball gaming space, Andrew, it was the preferred title. It was the most popular basketball sim out there. So it was really fun to do those two episodes with you and, basically reflect on a huge part of our childhood and our young adulthood and whatnot. What a time.
It definitely was. And, next year marks the 30th anniversary of NBA Live. It's getting harder to do those celebrations when we don't have a new game coming out, but maybe we can see what we can do to mark that anniversary next year.
Yeah, I'd love to have another episode where we celebrate. And hopefully, in the future, we get another NBA Live so we can talk about a new preview season. We can talk about the game's strengths and weaknesses. We can get our hands on the sticks, because I really do hope that NBA Live comes back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we've had some big shows since then. Of course, even before you came on board, we had chats with Scott O'Gallagher when he was at EA the first time. Sean O'Brien, at the time executive producer of NBA Live. Josh and Dave from Nemo Gameo. Andy Hull, who did Spelunky, of course, and also relevant to our community in particular, Dunk Lords. We've also had community guests, John Z1, Nathan Roger, Kenny Stildo, King J Mace, of course, most recently. Just great guests from the industry and the community alike.
Yeah, and we need more guests on, right? I would love to have more guests on in the NLSC because I love doing the interviews. I love learning more about them. I love allowing the community, the basketball gaming community, to learn more about them, what they do outside of basketball gaming, their interests, their favorite games, how they like to play the games, their favorite mods, so many different topics that you can touch on. Not just in relation to basketball gaming, but with life. So yeah, that would be great. And, as far as having guests on in the future, let's make that a goal, for 2024 to have more guests on.
Absolutely. And I also got to chat to Rod Redekop, Andrew Jinks, Dave Warfield from the early days of NBA Live for our 25th anniversary celebrations there. So yeah, let's see if we can get some more personalities from the early days of Live for the 30th anniversary. That'd be cool.
Would love it. And, the other thing too is there's a big basketball gaming community out there. The NLSC community itself is still big. And you respond to my mailbag questions the majority of the time. There's usually a lot of responses for those. You're interacting with our YouTube content and whatnot. But also, let us know what we could possibly do better with the show. Is there a certain segment you would, think would be helpful, and be interesting on the show? Is there, certain games you want us to talk about, et cetera? We'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. We love that interaction with our listeners and the the responses to the mailbag prompts and the suggestions for topics, etc. So, yeah, keep it coming. And I've got one last clip here, Derek. Obviously, doing the NLSC podcast is a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, as you said. And so the final clip here is a bit of a humor reel.
The majority of them who make videos make like 5 or 10 minute videos, and it's just mindless talk. Like, yeah, I think they're going to come out next year. Oh, I think this would be, oh, you see who came out? Oh, this is, and it's just like this 5 or 10 minute nonsense with no substance.
Jay Leno is covering NBA Live now.
Yeah, it sounded like it now. But that's...
Look, if they're going to bring characters back, bring Vic back from the dead. That would be awesome. Do it for like a Halloween expansion.
The Day of the Living Dead.
He can shoot, but he can't drive.
Dark, but good. I'll say that.
I love Walter.
So fuck Jay Williams.
So, I'm Andrew. Thank you, Leftos.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you, Eric.
Peace.
Thank you, John.
Go to my YouTube.
Funny.
Rate, comment, and subscribe. Thank you, Ben.
Buy my clothes, damn it.
Thank you, Pat. Yeah, buy Ben's clothes. Thank you, Pat.
Buy me a drink.
Oh, man. And thank you again, Zara.
I have no comments.
Then I'll close it by saying thank you everyone for listening, and remember, don't play video games, play basketball.
Yes! Sim Nation! I love it. Fantastic.
So some fun memories there. I love your Jay Leno impression. Obviously, that last clip is from the aforementioned episode 29, the longest ever. Just the outro of doing that after 3 hours. I think everyone was a little bit giddy, Derek.
That had me smiling ear to ear. I did not expect a humor reel at the end of this episode, so Andrew threw that in as a surprise. No, you guys had so much fun on the show back then. And it's really hard to get that many people on a show and have it go smooth, right? That's a lot of voices on one show, and you guys made it work. I mean, you and I have talked about it off air. It's even tough to have a show go smooth with 3 people, never mind 5 or 6. So kudos to you and the whole crew. However, I don't think I'll ever bring back that Jay Leno voice, Andrew.
No, I've had enough of Jay Leno as well. But yeah, that was fun to reflect on as well, the humorous times, and we obviously still have them. It's a blast to do the show with you, and we do have those laughs and the running jokes of the podcast I really enjoy.
Yeah, we're not stopping people. This podcast is going to go far into the future. We love basketball video games. We're still connecting all the time on them. We love listening to your feedback. We love listening to what you're playing, seeing those videos, hearing the commentary. I love doing the top 10 every single week. I love uploading gameplay videos to the NLSC YouTube. Like, we're definitely all in still with the NLSC.
And like you said earlier in the show, passion has to drive content creation.
Oh, 100%. Like, that's the thing is, I've loved basketball video games, since Double Dribble. And I've never lost that love. If anything, I've grown to love them more and more over time. And obviously, as time goes by, what happens, Andrew? Your collection increases. So I have more basketball video games to play than ever. And it's a passion and love that I get to enjoy with my 2 brothers, Mark and Nick. And it's a very, very special bond that we have. It's a very special thing for us to enjoy together. And we're going to be enjoying those, basketball video games together until, we're not around anymore.
And speaking of collections, we will get into this on a future show, maybe next week, depending on when it arrives. But I recently picked up the Game of the Year edition of NBA 2K12 that has the Legends Showcase DLC included on it. So that's going to be fun to revisit.
Yeah, I think that NBA 2K12 is a game that we need to play, through Parsec and whatnot, and then, get some gameplay videos up on the NLSC YouTube. Because every time I go back to play 2K12, I have a lot of fun. And I'm reminded why, we spent thousands of hours on that game when it was a new title.
Is NBA's greatest multiplayer? Can you play multiplayer, or is that just single player?
I believe it's single player, but I'd have to go back and take a look. That's a mode that I don't remember my brothers and I playing together.
I was going to say, if that's multiplayer, then that would definitely be the one to play, because that's got the authentic retro presentation, which was a very early example of that. Not the first example, yeah. NBA Jam 2004, obviously, but a very early example of 2K doing it.
Yeah, how fun is it to get on the floor and use the Bill Russell-led Celtics with a black and white filter?
Yeah, the tinny sounds.
Awesome.
Yeah. No, we will definitely have to do that, and of course we will talk about it here on the show. But thank you to everybody who joined us for this celebration of 500 episodes, who continues to tune in, who has tuned in over the years. My previous co-hosts, of course, thank you for starting the journey with me. Our wonderful guests over the years, Tim Kitzrow, obviously, and to you, Derek, once again, for continuing this journey with me. And it's a lot of fun, and like you said, we're not stopping anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the NLSC. I'm thankful for your friendship, and I'm thankful for, all the friends that I've gained in the NLSC community. Whether it's people that have worked on modding projects with me, just people that I've interacted with in general, people that I've met through the Discord, the 50 plus people that I've connected with on Parsec, the people I talk to on X, those who submit highlights for the top 10. You guys are such a big reason why the NLSC continues to flow, why it continues to move forward, why it continues to evolve. And that's why the site is still so strong today.
And look, without an audience, we're just yelling into the wind, right?
Yes, exactly.
With that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show, episode 500 of the NLSC Podcast. As always, we thank you for tuning in and invite you to join us again next week, either on the NLSC, nb-live.com, our YouTube channel, or your podcast app of choice. In the meantime, please connect with us on social media. That's where you can get in touch with us, and of course, stay up to date with all of our content. So Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X at D43G and at D4384. You can also reach me on YouTube, D4Free, and on the NLSC, D4Free.
I am Andrew in the forum, and Andrew NLSC on X. The NLSC is on X and Facebook at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep a look to the NLSC itself, nb-live.com, for everything we do for basketball video games. So, thank you once again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Go get buckets, everyone.